Peace. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to FlyDialogue, a podcast series featuring entrepreneurs, their passions, and experiences. Be sure to visit FlyDialogue.com to find out more about us, including our radio station where we stream hip hop 24/7. I'm telling you, we're literally jamming as we speak. And we also got a craft beer blog called Cream, Craft Rules, Everything Around Me, and plenty more. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the craft beer app Untapped, or on YouTube. Just search FlyDialogue on all of those platforms, even on Google. Be sure to follow us, friend us, subscribe. Ultimately, just check for us. We'd love to have y'all, and we look forward to connecting with you. Peace. From the standpoint of Airbnb, I don't know, man. I just feel like it's looked at, and that's probably my small frame of reference, but I'm like, man, I wonder how many people know like that there are folks who look like us in this space and that are doing it. You could,
and I think it's a valid conversation, right? Like, and I also think that like there's two ways to look at it, and there's also some twists and turns too, because you in some markets you do have people that look like us that are trying to appeal to a wide variety of audiences. So you have, I was actually just thinking about this. Like when you go to like the Caribbean,
yeah,
which is mostly like, brown and black folks or whatever.
Sure.
For someone to rent an Airbnb, there's really no question, right? They don't really necessarily care if that person is black or white. They just care about the setup, right?
And cleanliness.
and cleanliness, right? But when you get to the States, it's a little different. There could be a level, not could be, there is a level of, let's look at the host and this may or may not jive, right?
Wow.
One of those things where it's like, when you're in Airbnb, you kind of put your personal picture up there. So there's that layer. And then it's also like your decor and kind of how you stage the home and stuff like that. And it's kind of trying to be like a lot of folks who don't study up in the space and just kind of like want to stage the home based on what they have, not going out to like these places and buying new furniture and like really staging it from that perspective. But it's like, if let's say you want to make some extra cash, and you stage a room or you stage your house for the weekend, there's things like leaving pictures up, your profile, things like that in the States, depending on where you are, that's a factor, right? That's a factor. The neighborhood you're in, that's a factor. And it's just again, it's just very different when it comes to the Caribbean and stuff like that, where it's expected that I'm going to be around a lot of black and brown people. Sure. So there's a different level of like consideration. Because I've even heard other hosts say, "Oh, I got a review that says my neighborhood was sketchy, or my neighborhood was this, or my neighborhood was that." And at the end of the day, it really was just a black and brown neighborhood, right? And it wasn't like there was abandoned buildings, people doing anything negative, anything like that. But it was like that bias comes into it. So
sure,
so if my recommendation is always like, if you're gonna create a neutral space, like a space is inviting for all people, then create that. But if you're like, no, I'm gonna create a space that's inviting to me, and I'm gonna target people that look like me, or that will enjoy these things, then go all in that way. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just don't be surprised, right? If there's comments from people who don't understand the space that you create based on like ethnicity and things like that, right?
Typically when I'm traveling, I'm using hotels, obviously, and not even for just business, for pleasure, because I'll rack up points. That's one thing I've thought about Airbnb or VRBO. Like, somehow coming up with a point system. I don't even know if that's possible because that would take money out of, the actual owner's hands rather than it being the anyway.
Be
But
dope.
I mean, it'd be cool, but I don't know if it'd be cool for y'all. I guess somebody's got to foot that bill. Anyway, just a thought because I try, but in my head, let me circle back to what I was trying to say. Um, like when I'm in those spaces, because I know it's not a hotel, it's somebody's house, and they're kind of, I don't know, creating or curating that space for
Yeah.
a visitor, someone who's on vacation, or you've talked about short-term rentals or long-term rentals.
Yeah.
I look at it as a space that obviously it's not mine. I'm open to how they're curating it, but I'm also not necessarily critiquing it. What I'm critiquing is the cleanliness of it.
Right.
They introduce me to is up for grabs. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's not, oh man, they had European art up. I'm not European. I would prefer to see Black American RBG, Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not my space. I'm just renting the space,
Right.
but I'm open to whatever's in it. Like, for instance, what we had the other day, a couple weeks ago, Go Week
Yeah.
trip, that suite that we were in, excuse me, the villa, but the master suite that we were in, like there were pictures of, like there's a book with Marilyn Monroe on there and like some, kind of like what I would call B footage or B photography,
Right.
or sessions, with her in there. And, yeah, I guess it was European art or something like that, the way they decorated it. So naturally I would think, yeah, this is probably an owner who is not Black or brown or whatever, but I don't like, it's not going to bother me if it,
Yeah.
and to your point, it's like it's probably only a thing, and not to point the finger, turn this into that. But in my head, I'm kind of like, you know what? It's probably only an issue if it's something that's non-white. You know what I mean?
Right.
If it's a space that's been curated specifically, um, to be inviting or culturally inclusive to Black and brown or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Flip that on its head. If you
Yeah.
go into, like, let's say that the place we stayed in, or if you go into a space and there's all Black and brown art, then it's a different invitation, right? Like you would probably walk in that space and be like, oh, like just based on the vibe there.
Yeah.
So that's how powerful. And again, in different countries is different because there's a expectation. Like if I go to Japan, I don't expect to see, white or Black art
At
or
all.
whatever, right? I know what I'm getting into, right? It should
And
be
probably open to it, right?
yeah.
It is the expectation. Sure.
It's the expectation, right? So that's why I said in the States, there's this interesting dynamic. And so like, and it comes down to, there's a completely deeper conversation when it gets down to nuance and things like that. Like one of the things that trips me out all the time is like towels. I've learned that culturally, Black and white people think about towels very different. It's just quirky things, but you start to see and notice trends about people and how they use the space and the expectations of the space. So it's really interesting. It's a great like study in in how people kind of live. Because like you said, you go to a hotel, you can, somebody is there to typically cater to what you need. So if you need this or that, this is a preference versus that a preference, they can pick up the phone and they can adjust the space right there. But when it's a home that's pretty much, it's kind of like standalone.
Yeah.
Then they either create, use the space and like make it their own, or they just kind of have to live with it. The reason why I really enjoyed Airbnb was because you can curate it around the location. So it wasn't about me or my cultural preference. It was about the location. So,
Sure.
my first, my spot was in Louisville, Kentucky, right? So you curate it around Louisville. So bourbon, horses,
Derby.
Slugger Museum, Derby, all those different things. And like, what would someone who's coming into the area who wants to understand the neighborhood, the food, and more than likely they're coming for Derby or a festival, what would they need? So it was completely one-sided in that regard, right?
Yeah.
And so all those other things didn't really matter. But again, as you think about people who are like, hey, because it's a great way to make some extra cash.
Sure.
It's a great way to to maximize your home if you're into that, and you can do that. So there's all these different things, but a lot of times, and I've seen a shift. There was this, I don't know if you ever heard of couch surfing.
No.
So couch surfing was like and there's probably other versions of this, but couch surfing is like the first version of Airbnb. And you literally it was a network, right? So you literally just, you kind of go online and you look up like where you're going to be, and you see who's offering up their couch for you to crash on.
Man, so it's literally that. It's just the couch. But was it really the couch, or was it a room?
It depends on what they had, right? But the couch was like base level.
Base level, right? Yeah, you crash on the couch. The guy on the couch.
And it wasn't. There's no cost. There was no cost really for it. It was just all about networking.
Oh, it's a network.
It's a network. Yeah. And I'm sure if you made food for people and stuff like that, but really it was like that exchange. Yeah. It was that exchange. Like, hey, I'm new to the area. I want to show you around. Like, it was that exchange. And that was like the core of it.
Man.
And
I would love to tap into that network.
Well, that was a time when like there were higher levels of trust too, right? Because these are totally random people. You have no connection to these people. Random people.
Yeah.
But you get so much out of it because you don't know what the day or the night's going to bring, right? I remember I couch surfed in Detroit, and the guy, he actually made beer bomb, which I actually see it in stores now too. So he's moved his brand out to like Whole Foods and different places. So he sold beer bomb, beard bomb, and he had a spot in this neighborhood that had been like basically, burned because they burned cribs, and they were burning cribs in Detroit. So he had a spot in his neighborhood and just kind of like told me about the neighborhood, and it was a cool little setup, right? It was a cool setup. Don't know him from, never met him before. He felt very familiar. It was cool. Stayed, a night and then bounced, right?
Yeah.
Same thing in Sicily. Couch surfed in Sicily too.
Crazy.
Right? And it was cool, right? But it's just one of those things where like the expectation is that there's an exchange of like, y'all have a meal together, y'all talk about like where you're from, what you're doing. It's like there's an engagement there, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like in Airbnb now, it's like I'm coming here just to stay. Like, don't bother me, don't call me. It's like,
oh yeah,
like I don't want to have dinner with you.
Yeah, I don't want to see you at all. Like,
and it was crazy because when Airbnb first started, it wasn't like that.
I kind of remember that actually. Excuse me, I shouldn't say personally. I didn't have a personal experience with it, but I remember people talking about it because they were inviting them, like what it sounds like couch surf is, they were inviting them into their space.
Yep.
And they were hosting them, not
hosting. Yep.
You know what I mean? They were hosting, right?
Yep.
So
yep.
I never did that. I never did couch surf or Airbnb at that point. Obviously, we've done it since then, even collectively. But
no, man,
that's interesting.
It was like the expectation was, oh, okay, I'll walk you through. I'll give you the key. I might show you around. I'll pick you up from the airport. Like it was this. There was so much of this like experience with it, right?
You were connecting with that person.
Yeah, for sure.
There was intent to connect not only with that person, but get their perspective on not only obviously their house, but that neighborhood and surrounding area, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what really got me into, couch surfing and Airbnb, because I'm like, man, at a hotel, I wouldn't really understand how to navigate this neighborhood, the area. You can't really uncover a lot of those gems. But through when it was a curated, hosted experience,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you got so much out of the city in a short period of time. Like I said, the guy in Detroit, man, I went to so many different places in Detroit. You actually saw the neighborhood, like you experienced like the lives of real people there. We actually went to a pallet burning party where like it was just cats around, went to this warehouse, cats around, like pallets burning, music playing, everybody just like drinking, hanging out. It
Yeah.
was dope. It was dope. Something I would never experience in a hotel.
So, well, clearly. But okay, when you're talking about like a literal pallet, like a shipping pallet where they're
Yeah,
burning
yeah.
like a bonfire.
Yeah,
Like
because
urban
they
bonfire.
ran their business out of a warehouse, and it was a collective warehouse. So you had guys who were making ceramic speakers. You had his beer bomb manufacturing was coming out of that warehouse. You had some other industries, and so they were a collective in this warehouse.
Dope.
And it was like Friday night, and they were like, "Yo, we had a bunch of shipments. We took everything off the pallet. Let's play some music. Let's drink some brews. Let's have some pizza." And it was, and like I said, man, it was dope. We stayed out there, and you meet so many different people. Like you learned about the city, the state of things, and everybody's just cool. So,
man, I love that you did that. I didn't realize you were doing that kind of situation, man, because that is literally a very uncomfortable space, but a space that I literally live in like day to day. Like not that intimate where I'm at a bonfire, but it has the ability to go there depending on where the conversation may go. You know what I mean? And it's funny, like that can well, I won't get into that, but for some people, obviously, it's just not possible. Like they don't, yeah, I won't even talk about gender wise because females, it's going to be totally different from them, like that, and it being a safe space and feeling space, so on and so forth. But
yeah,
one of the privileges of a male, I think, I would say I not think no, but from that standpoint, God, that would be so nourishing to my extroverted soul, right? I would be like, oh my God. And let me tell you what happened next. They started burning pallets. Like what? I would soak all of that up. Wow, that would be amazing.
yeah. But the expectation was, like I'm gonna, the hosts were
Yeah.
doing a very good job of hosting, and the visitors were doing a very good job of like, just trying to soak up what's going on out there,
Yeah.
And
Dude,
yeah, so that's how it was, man. And I remember the first time I was hosting someone, and they did not want to see me or talk to me. They were like, "I'm fine," and I was just like,
you got stiff arm, bro.
I was like, the game has changed. The game has
They
changed.
pulled the Heisman on you, man.
They definitely pulled a Heisman on it, but it was like it was a relief in a sense too, because at that point I was like, oh well, I can host from anywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
So then you come up with systems and processes where you can host from afar.
Yeah.
So you have a guidebook, you send out information, they ask questions, you ask the right questions, you give them right answers. So then it goes from being a host to kind of a concierge in a sense.
Yep. Yep. I was gonna say that's what you find at the hotel. You know what I mean? That's the closest thing
Yeah.
to that experience that someone staying at a hotel would have, but not all hotels have concierge though.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So there's spaces and places now and this is the one thing I love about Airbnb or the model of Airbnb. There's spaces and places where you will, let's say you go to another country, depending on where you go, you will have hosts, like actual hosts. Like I've been to an Airbnb where, you pay a little bit, but the host will cook a dinner. And I mean an amazing meal, right? And if they're hosting more than let's say they have like a duplex or a villa, there's more than one kind of group of people staying there. Everybody comes together. It's the exchange, it's the conversation, and it's great food. You know what I'm saying? And the host is preparing the food. So Airbnb in a sense has kind of multiplied their experiences that they can create for folks. So they have this concept of like, you have the old school host, you have the concierge, and then you just have, just a curated space.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's the, like I said, just kind of seeing it from how it's evolved and being just experiencing that. It's really cool to kind of see and still be a part of, But I do, it just depends on what you need that day, right? Like some days you just want to be a great host. Some days you want to be a concierge. Some days you just want to set it and forget it,
Yeah. No, I mean the evolution of it makes perfect sense too, because you got people on there that have different intent and different reasons for why they want to, you know, have the space. It could be, the exchange, that connecting point, showing off their space, not in a bad way, but just kind of like hey man, let me tell you about this. I love this place. I love
Right.
and I love this area, man. I just want to share it. From that standpoint, man, I wish Tanya was up because this ties into like, I mean, and you can speak to it as well, man. The exchange program, like, at a higher learning level. I think you even experienced it in high school, but Tanya going over to Puebla, I think that's right, Puebla, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about like the exchange, that's initially what I thought. I was like, oh yeah, Tanya did that, and I would love to get her perspective on just that. Like it was, short term in the grand scheme of things, but she was over there for, I think a whole semester, right?
Oh,
So
wow. Wow.
yeah, I mean, when she went, obviously to Mexico, I shouldn't say obviously, but she went because she speaks a foreign language. She speaks Spanish,
Right. Right.
in your case, Japanese. So she immersed herself. It was the immersion program, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would love to maybe we could continue the discussion in that regard, but I feel like that kind of is somewhat of a natural evolution of how Airbnb kind of came about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That maybe that's a stretch, but I don't think so. The way that she basically was living with that family. Now there were a group of people, a group of peers, students that were over there as well.
Yeah.
But when they went home at night, they went home to their respective homes.
Yeah. For sure.
Families, right? So they connected culturally with the family that was there, that was hosting them, similar to like an Airbnb, that initial experience. Like,
Yeah.
have a host who's willing to do it and open up their home and their space to someone who's probably going to be culturally different, but they want to share it with them and have that time with them to, I don't know. I feel like in the beginning, it's kind of like you're proud of the space that you have and you want to share it. You want to
Yeah.
share
For
it.
sure.
It's a good thing, right? So
Yeah. People who look for it, who understand it,
yeah,
who get it, they still do it.
yeah,
But from a commercial standpoint or a widespread standpoint, it's still really covert.
yeah.
There's something called, I think it's called woofing.
Mm,
And woofing is basically like, I'll have to look this up, but woofing is basically like where, let's say I have a house or a farm and I just need people to come help me, and my farm's in Argentina. So what I would do is I would go online and see that you need some extra help on your farm and it's in Argentina. And if I want to travel there, I would go and you would host me and I would help you with your farm for whatever time period you need help. So it could be like a month, it could be 2 weeks or whatever, right?
yeah,
But what that does is, again, you can provide your hands or your help for the host, but the host would host you. They would put you up. They would, y'all would have like an agreement as far as food,
yeah,
and you would live in Argentina and work. And I've seen it to where people, that's all they do. They travel around to different places and they just help. They become a part of somebody's team or establishment and they
yeah.
bounce around. And
Wow.
it's and that's the thing about it. Like people that look like us, especially like in the States or people who come from like our same neighborhoods, it's like a lot of people don't know about these things,
Bro, I had
and
no idea that existed. That's crazy.
yeah, and you know this whole, like, they call it the trust economy, right? The whole trust economy is starting to really kind of open up in the US with like Uber, Airbnb, TaskRabbit, where you have random people, you give your information to random people, you give money to random people, and they come to your house, and or you go to their house. You have no earthly idea who they are. Like I remember with my dad, he came into town, and I was at work, and I couldn't go pick him up from the airport. So I was like, "Look, Pops, I'm gonna send a car for you." Or I said, I'll get somebody to pick you up. I think I said. And he was like, okay, cool, you know. So
without even thinking about it.
Without even thinking about it, right?
I got a guy. Yeah.
And so he told me he got in the car at the airport, and they were like, oh, you know, they said his name. He got in the car at the airport. He's like, yeah. So the first thing he asked the driver was, how long have you known my son?
How long have you?
And he's like, the driver's like, I don't know your son. And he's like, you don't know him? And so it's just like, it blew his mind. He was like, you're randomly picking me up. You're a stranger.
The funny thing is I literally had a conversation with my mom and dad tonight. They're coming to Tampa for Knox's birthday. And she's like, man, maybe I can get Brian to, pick me up for the airport or this, that, and the other. I was like, yeah, he probably would. I was like, what time is your flight? It's like 6 a.m. And I was like, well, what day? She's like, it's Tuesday. I'm coming Tuesday to Tuesday.
He's not coming for you.
I was like, he might. I said, Brian lives but to serve, as he so eloquently. Right. But in my head, I was like, taxi, Uber. Like, you have so many other resources, and one of her main things, a big concern now, with dad's health being what it is. She just doesn't, stranger danger,
man.
I don't want anybody coming to my house that I don't know. Like, and I'm like, to that point, it's like, the trust, what do you call it? The
trust economy, man.
Trust economy. Yeah. Trust economy. They don't relate to that in that sounds like a trap.
It sounds like a trap, though. Sounds like a trap. Yeah. So
you want me to die.
Yeah. So you gonna I don't know you. I don't know, I haven't seen any reviews on you. I know you have no track record. You're just a random person. And you're gonna do what? So
it's funny how important connection is, man. Like I mean, it's downplayed, especially in that generation, but how important that connection is, that and how it's just changing. I won't say it's it's bad now. It's just changing. But literally the first and if I'm from that generation, if I'm getting into someone's car, like, and my son has told me, I got a guy coming to scoop you up. So how you know Al, man? How you know my son? Like just naturally, I'm just starting. This is small talk. I mean, conversation is going to shift immediately. Like, what? Like, how do you even know where to go? Like,
exactly. Yeah, that was the other thing too. How do you know? He told me where. I know where he lives. You do?
He told you where he lives, and he doesn't know you. Like, why would he do that?
And it's. I mean, it just tells you about the state of a lot of different things, man. It tells you about the state of where we came from, because to your point, stranger danger, man. And it tells you about where we're going to. I mean, how there's this level of trust. I mean, and that's such an interesting concept. There's a level of trust, but also a level of skepticism
and disconnect,
right?
Sure.
When you travel abroad, there's an expectation of a certain level of openness, because it's not your country, it's not your home turf usually. There's just this level. But it's like when you travel in the States domestically, depending on where you go, you expect certain things, and you're essentially home, right? So I mean, it's just so interesting. It's just so interesting, because you could travel to Miami, you could travel to Idaho, and if I'm from Virginia or Florida, then I kind of know that there's going to be a little bit of a difference, right? Florida is like one of those unique places.
Sure.
You know, not saying Virginia's unique at all, but still, it's like there's a certain like understanding when you live in a certain place. But if I went from Virginia to Kentucky, it's gonna be pretty much the same, right? Like I don't, but when you travel domestically, long story short, what I'm trying to say is when you travel domestically, depending on where you go, you have a level of expectation around a different experience versus a similar experience, and that shapes how you engage, shapes how you move around. It's cool, you know. It's one of those things where it's like I understand why some people unfortunately don't want to leave the States because you can get different culture depending on where you go.
Yeah.
You know, get different scenery where you go. Now you
Yeah.
you don't get a large gap of a new culture. You know, like that. You don't get that raw, uncut, purely different culture, but you can get some variation in culture, man. So that trust economy, it varies depending on how far you head across the spectrum of like experience. So, but yeah, man, it's anyway. So going back to Airbnb and all that stuff, like it's yeah, I enjoy it for all those reasons, and you know, I think a lot of times people try to you Airbnb will totally expose people who just want to make money off of Airbnb and not take the time to think about other people. Because I've seen people post, and maybe they were joking, but I've seen people post, you know, their messy room on Airbnb. And it's like, yo, you can stay here if you want, you know. And I'm just like, bruh, like, like don't do that. That's a scare BNB, not an Airbnb.
Airbnb. Yes.
But some people don't know. It's like staging a home. Like you have I've seen people stage a home and it looks like something out of HGTV. Yep. And I've seen people stage a home and you can see them in a mirror with the phone taking a picture of the room, right, you know, or the bathroom. So
sure, some
people just don't know, and they don't understand the experience. And I think that context, the backstory, is also important.
Yeah.
Because if somebody's calling you a lot, asking you questions or needing recommendations for a restaurant, you might be like, don't, you know, don't call me, you know, like, I don't know.
Google it, man.
Google it. Yeah, look it up. What do you know, like, but I think Airbnb, the other thing that's pretty cool is Airbnb does have tools and resources that they encourage folks to use, and they try to explain what a good experience looks like. You know, they try to explain what a good host is. So they do a lot of like good work around what it should be. Now, some people ignore it. Some people actually use it.
Yeah.
But I find that more people, at least in my experience, more people use it than kind of ignore it.
Yeah.
So that's always nice.
Yeah. I mean, I could speak to the Airbnbs that I've had, like for the most part, you know, hell, in the past couple of years, I mean, I think the space that we just shared in, was that right there near off Bayshore Drive? And then I thought that was a pretty good space. The space, what was that last year? And was that Stewart, Florida, where we went? Kind of, was that north of Palm Beach? I think north of Palm Beach area, either north or south. I'm thinking
it was southwest. I mean southeast. Sorry,
southeast. Yeah. So that space was cool. You know, there was the ant situation. I forgot about that, but they kind of prepped us for it. There was like trails of ants. That was kind of crazy, actually. Especially for KG, they were in his room. That was thinking about it. But like sugar ants, I think they were sugar ants.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, I think people, I don't know, man. I mean, one, you're kind of held accountable by the rating system. So you if you want repeat business, you know, you're probably going to be at least sensitive. At the very least, but I would imagine be highly sensitive to what people, the feedback that people give you about the space that you're inviting them into and charging them for. Hell, I mean, you know, that seems like a no-brainer. Like, you know, somebody who is hosting or I guess has a space and they're getting called a scare B&B versus an Airbnb. It's like, good Lord, like, how can you not be sensitive to that information and immediately want to change what that looks like? Unless that's, your stick. I don't know if people just do that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think, but I think it comes down to like people not knowing or not understanding, or
yeah,
like not every home is right for Airbnb. You have another layer of complexity where it's like your neighborhood may not want an Airbnb.
yo,
Um,
we experienced that in Nashville. We
yeah,
experienced it in Nashville. We were kind of like sneaking. Well, not us, but our neighbors were like sneaking, Airbnb in, and like I think eventually it kind of got pulled out.
yeah,
But and it may have been a safety concern. Not to I won't go down that rabbit hole. Different
yeah,
story.
yeah.
Downtown Nashville, man.
Yeah.
You never know.
But
But
I mean, it's true though. It's true, because I think going back to that whole trust economy, Airbnb, when you host, you are representative of kind of that brand too, and the liability, because they have this coverage, you know,
absolutely.
and the liability is ultimately falls on them to a certain degree.
Yeah,
Um, so that's also a part of it. And again, back when couch surfing was popping or early parts of Airbnb, there
yeah,
wasn't a liability situation like that. They were like, oh, if they rip your couch or something like that, we'll show you how to negotiate and maybe we'll cover it. But it wasn't at the level. Obviously, Airbnb wasn't as big as it is now.
right.
Now they're publicly traded. They're
Sure.
still growing. I mean, they're still not the number one platform for stuff like that. Booking has the number one spot, but Airbnb is, Expedia and Booking are number one kind of situations for that. But
Yeah.
Airbnb's got a lot of future trajectory and growth. They're one of the few companies during the pandemic, travel companies during the pandemic, that actually made, progressed and made profit during the pandemic.
That makes sense because
They
they
were
have
not
private spaces. Like, yeah,
they were an anomaly. They were
yeah,
an anomaly, and it was really interesting. And this is what drove that. Instead of like with Booking.com and those type of things, I'm not sure what helped them survive it, but I know with Airbnb, it was the long term hosting that took over. Instead of short term rentals, it was longer term. So you had the traveling nurses, you had people who were relocating to other areas.
right.
The housing boom helped them out.
Yeah,
New people, they called it the great resignation. That helped them out. People relocating for more money. People relocating to get a bigger house because they was cooped up.
yeah,
They needed to get out of the doing Zoom meetings in the kitchen. They wanted another room. They bought another house.
yeah. Kind of
So
like a transition space almost. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
kind of
So
the next move. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, so Airbnb was a winner in the whole during the pandemic, and that was a battle test for them. They from a financial standpoint, they were never really profitable because they were essentially a startup. They were never really profitable, but during the pandemic they became profitable. So
Crazy.
as from a company standpoint, they've got a lot of like stripes, during the pandemic.
I do that.
And they're activists now, in a sense, so they promote non-biased hosting. They promote, they support a lot of causes. They support um you know the stuff that's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah,
They're hosting displaced families from Ukraine, from the war and all those things. So long story short, it's like I also rock with them because I think ethically we align. you
yeah.
know um
That's important to note too. I think. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm glad you said that. That them using their platform for that kind of stuff, um, has the ability to set them apart, at least from a perception standpoint of how that brand is viewed and perceived.
yeah,
But that's a nice touch. I can start because I didn't really know that, but now that you've said it, it's like, of course they would do that. Why wouldn't they do that? So
yeah, for sure.
yeah, I like
So
that.
I can get on board with those things. Like and I've the space I play in HR is really around onboarding and things like that. And I feel like this is this something similar, and I'm a traveler. This is something similar. So
Man,
this really aligns to a lot of the stuff that I do,
yeah.
just
I didn't
like
think about it from that standpoint. I was literally trying to figure out a way to segue. I'm glad you said that. To segue to like your background, obviously your dad, being in real estate, realtor, like, doing that piece, but also you traveling and experiencing like, you know what I mean? Like these
yeah,
spaces that, hostels, if you will,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And the evolution of those, and then seeing Airbnb from where it came, like couch
couch
surfing.
surfing, yeah.
Is that now owned by Airbnb, or is that still its own entity, or seem
They
like
still have, I think they still have their own entity. I think they have like I mean, it's like I don't know how it's evolved. I haven't been on there in a long time, but it's
yeah,
kind of like the Craigslist version of Airbnb.
yeah, makes
They
sense.
it's a site that does what it does, and
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. They're not looking to, you know, grow and get more people and make more money and all those things. They don't
yeah.
have all the bells and whistles, but
Well, it
but
sounds
yeah,
like
couch
a
surfing.
real community. You know
Yeah,
what I
couch
mean?
couch surfing is probably still going on, and yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, but yeah, that history, man. I would love to talk more about that. We've been on here for like almost 45 minutes, man. I don't want to hold you, but from
yeah,
that standpoint, like you tying in the HR thing, I didn't even think about from an onboarding, like, welcome to this new space that you're entering professionally.
yeah,
How can we make this better? This is what we prepared for you, but we are open to feedback and would love to hear how we can, make this a better space. Like that absolutely aligns with, everything that you're doing. And that's kind of dope. That's an interesting, it's really weird, man. Somebody said this to me. I don't know, and it may have been you, man. But like the way that we operate now is like, you may have a livelihood, and it may be very fulfilling and very satisfying or whatever, like personally and professionally. On one hand, but you may have a livelihood that you're like, this is how I make money. But then you have other means or revenue streams or other things that you do that might be revenue streams, but they might just be something that balances like this job that you really don't like, but it affords you the luxuries of being able to do other things that you
yeah,
like.
yeah,
I like how you've kind of tied it all together, like maybe not completely, but things that you're doing, like they tie into kind of who you are. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And like and experiences that you've had, and like you being able to contribute to like new experiences that people are going to have.
yeah,
Like this space, man, it's like it's a really dope space for you, man. Like it's a good look. Like it's adventurous. You being I would call you an extrovert, but you have your introverted moments, I think, at the same time. Like there's a balance there. But yeah, man, like just having the conversation, really thinking about how you've gotten to this point where you are, man. It's pretty dope.
yeah.
It's been a
And
ride.
like
I've
one of the
lived
ways that I got
through
really
you
good
for a
at
while.
one of the I know we can shut it down, but like, and I mean, you can talk more about it later, man, because I would love to talk more about like the exchange,
Mm,
like living abroad, like,
yeah.
and kind of like that whole situation too. But one of the things that actually helped me understand how to host and tell people about the city and stuff like that was y'all coming to Louisville, right?
Oh, word. Okay.
Because I would go visit places and I'd be like, oh, when y'all come back, I got to show you this or I
Yeah.
got to show you that. And it got to the point where I would literally go through all the spaces and places that I visited with you all, and
Yeah.
I would kind of like take that menu and I would chop it up and I'd be like, okay, what are you looking for? If the person came in, I'd be like, what are you looking for? I want to do this. I want to find like a nice bar. I want to have some good bourbon. I want to do this after the Derby or before. And I'm like, and based on our experiences, I was able to curate for them an
Yeah.
experience. Because I was like, man, after Derby, me and my boys were wiped out. So you probably won't do anything after Derby. You know what I'm saying? And
You
they were
get
like,
it.
yeah.
You
I'm
get it.
glad you didn't you told us to just go back and chill because we were
Chill out.
exhausted,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
you
like
know.
I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those experiences like specifically related to, and man, I mean, it was like y'all were it's literally a super host, literally from the time we stepped into Louisville to every other time afterwards. Yeah, to that point. It was like, oh man, there's dog. Like, and it was funny because, you know, me and Tanya kept saying the whole time, like, I just didn't know there was this much stuff going on in Louisville. Like, I don't even know if he should have even told us about that. Is that even worth mentioning? But there was this level of excitement too. It was kind of like, nah, man, like, check this out. This is dope. Like, from Spinelli's to, what was it, 3rd Street?
I mean, there was so many.
It's so many pockets too.
Yeah,
like, you know, Beechwood, all over the spot, man. Like that drag,
Bardstown Road,
the brunch spot right there.
Yeah.
You know, it was such a, I mean, it's just obviously still there. It's a pocket, man. But that was a multiple experiences, man, that, man, couldn't have been curated better, man, from the standpoint of just like, man, let me show you this. Let me show you this. Like the spirit of what you're talking about, I think where Airbnb started, you guys definitely captured that, man, from the time we stepped into that space, like moving forward. It was dope. So yeah, man, that all makes sense, man. Like where you are, like I've never even really pieced it together. Maybe subconsciously I've kind of thought about it randomly, but man, that's a story, man, for real.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the one thing now I always encourage like folks who feel like, oh, I don't, you know, like I need to make a side hustle or I need to figure out something. It's like a lot of times you have it, you just, you know, what they always say, like the grass isn't greener, you know, other places, it's greener where you water it. And a lot of times we have the tools, the resources, the experiences right there. We just don't consider them so valuable that we can monetize that. Or maybe we haven't been, you know, the
for sure,
you know, the light bulb hadn't gone off, you know.
Oh man.
You know, but a lot of times
Instagram, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, but I'm saying like a lot of times you got it, you know, and, you know, just like I said, just having visitors come in, you know, creates a lane for potential revenue. Like you can, you know, you can host people in the city and use the experiences from visitors coming in to do that, you know, or, I mean, and like what you do, right? Like explaining, and we talked a little bit about this, but like explaining the experience of enjoying craft, right?
Sure.
You know, it's a passion project, so it's easy for you, you know. And we can talk later about teaching English in Japan, but I kind of equate it to that. It's like people literally just pay you to speak English, something that you've been doing for, you know, 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
And it's like, you know, once you figure out how to connect, you're just literally going over conversation and helping somebody be a better conversationalist in your native tongue.
Right.
Like when I was teaching English in Japan, I swear, I just want to kind of like go and put up a billboard in any neighborhood and be like, come teach English. It is the easiest hustle ever. It's the easiest gig ever.
I remember you talking to me about it, and I was just mind blown. You're like, bro, if you just come over here, I'll just show you, man. Like you literally will be teaching English to people who don't speak it. And I was just like, what?
Yeah.
It's that easy. He was like, you know, that's all you do. You're
all you do.
Having conversations with people who are at a different, obviously, you know, level of speaking the language than you are. You are the expert.
Yeah.
And you're helping them out. And I was just like, that makes perfect sense. They need people to do that. Like if there's probably a crap ton of people, not to be arrogant, but there's a lot of people who probably want to speak English and learn how to do it in a safe space that they, you know, where they're not fully immersed, and you're trying to learn their language. You know what I mean? So it's such an exchange and a you know, what I would call a very fruitful connection point, kind of setting the stage for just like, I don't know, so much growth from both parties, man.
Yeah. And it goes on. I mean, you could literally like do that gig with like somebody for a long time. And, you know, the other thing is the instant gratification of at some point things will click and that person will be able to have a conversation. And like that moment is so fulfilling because it's like, I remember when you couldn't even say, where's the bathroom? Or you couldn't say, you know, you couldn't order food, but now you're like having a conversation. You're talking about politics. You're talking about this. You're talking about that. You know, I have friends who, you know, today when I talk to them, they talk about like, I mean, I mean, there's so many complex things. And I'm like, man, I remember when you could not order a drink, you
Right.
know, like you could not tell me left or right, you know, like it's so crazy.
Had to just point.
Yeah, you just point, you know, beer, one more,
That's crazy.
beer, you
Right.
know?
I mean,
You
that really
know,
does speak to like the connection part of it too, man. Like the fact that you're saying, man, I got friends where like I was their teacher, but you know, that the evolution of that relationship, you know, from where it came to where it is now, like that's, you know, in my, you know, uh, I don't know, man, from my perspective, I feel like, you know, when Sheen passed, that was one of the things that I was really trying to like figure out like the connection and all of that stuff, man. And you know, so many people kept coming to me talking about, man, he just connected so many people, and I was like, wow, you know. And I kept thinking about that, and we naturally just get that from mom. We get that from our mom.
yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah.
it was no stranger, but yeah, the fact that you went over there to do, you know, this is the ultimate hustle, but you walk away because you've connected with these people on a real level. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Not only teaching them, but you know, just man, just being open to that experience in and of itself, and just being open to people, man. And you connect with them. It's like, nah, man, that's my guy. We can talk
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
exchange, like, you know, two
Yeah.
folks who just fluently speak English now. It wasn't always like that. And
Yeah. No,
that's a
I mean that's
dope situation.
yeah, and like I said, I would love to have that conversation, you know, just about being abroad. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when you're open and you're talking or you're trying to kind of speak the language, because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen, you know, folks who go over there and they're like, somebody will speak English, I'll be okay, and and you know, it's and they navigate it, but
Right.
it's not,
It's
you know,
tricky.
it's not pretty, but they navigate it.
Yeah.
And then you have people
Yeah.
who go over there and they're like, they're trying, you know, they like they try to watch TV, they try to listen to music, they try to connect on certain levels with
Yeah.
people, and the experience is so much better for those people. And it could be something so simple like, I
Yeah.
had a homeboy over there. He knew the most random. They call them kotawazas, and kotawazas are like like short poems in a sense, but they like have this like weird twist, or like
Hmm.
they're you know, kind of like proverbs in a sense too. You know, they can most people don't know, most Americans don't know them, right? But this
Sure.
dude's like, he's kind of like a, you know, a nerd or whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
that was his thing. He would break the ice with a kotawaza, and people were like, what? Why? What do you know about that? And whatever. But just from that, it was like it showed interest. Like, you know, something that most people don't know. You might not be super fluent,
Yeah.
but it just kind of broke the ice, and that exchange allows you to learn more. You can be corrected and not feel offended.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, there's a
it's
sense of
just
vulnerability, man. I mean, just
yeah,
putting yourself out there, and like I say, being willing to be corrected, and actually knowing and learning. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, it's childlike, man. That's what kids do all the time, man. You know,
yeah.
they boldly raise their hand and answer the question, or just, you know, that is couldn't be. That is totally wrong. What are you talking about? You know, having
It's true.
that, like,
It's
no,
true.
that's it. No, that not exactly. But let me tell you what it, and that's all it is, man.
And
Just being,
yep,
you're trying to learn, and then you've got somebody on the other end who wants to teach. So, you know,
yep. Approach it from that vulnerability. Approach it from from whatever you understand. You
yeah,
know. So
it's got to be a
if
safe
it's
space, right? You know,
yeah, you know, if you understand it from a music perspective, approach it from music and
yeah,
grow from there. If you understand it from like a, you know, cartoon Dragon Ball Z, approach it from there and expand.
yeah,
You know, because there's people, you know, that's the thing about it, man. Like, people don't realize that like the world is, everybody's way more similar than they are different.
yeah,
You know, and you know, you got, you know, hip hop heads, you got people who love books, who love arts, culture. travel in every space and place, in the world, and so
Yeah.
it's just, but it's, and it's hard. It's intimidating to go to a place where you don't speak the language, you don't know anything about, like you can't really articulate, you can't really move the same way you do at home, but it's also the joy of it too,
Yeah.
and just having your wits about you. Danger in most countries is danger. We can intuitively understand that.
Yeah.
We know in the States what we should and shouldn't be doing. It applies in all countries. It's like a safe place to be.
Yeah. Well, because we're more similar than we are different, right?
Exactly.
So danger same across the board. Right?
It's across the board, man. Hanging out after midnight, hey.
Probably higher level of danger, but
so
be careful.
But yeah, be careful. Be responsible. So yeah.
I was gonna talk for maybe 5-10 minutes, man. Here we are, an hour in. So it'll get away from you, man. But yeah. Hopefully we'll do it again soon though, man.
All right, that's what's up, man.
All right, bro. Love you, man.
All right, peace. Love you, man.